session, next speaker, and I know we already have him here, Jon Cooper, right here. So let me do a quick intro, and then Jon, it's all going to be yours. Jon is the co-founder and CEO of Overalls Inc. He's a serial insert tech entrepreneur with a track record of building and scaling innovative companies at the intersection of technology and insurance. Jon was the founder and CEO of Life.io, a leading digital customer engagement platform that was acquired in 2021. Prior to that, Jon served as chief of staff at TriZetto, and obviously his career spans a wide range of strategic and leadership roles at various organizations. He holds an MBA from the Wharton School at UPenn, and we are looking forward to everything he's got to talk about today. I think the big conversation and topic I think that we would look forward to is basically boosting employee engagement in the era of disruption. Over to you, Jon. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much. And what an important and exciting topic to be speaking about here today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and jump in here. So presumably everyone can see my screen now. Jon Cooper, co-founder and CEO of Overalls. Today we're living in an interesting time. We've got all the work, everything we're talking about from an AI perspective that's going on right now. But beyond that, more broadly, what's happening at a macro level, we're 5 years past a pandemic. We've got an age of constant interruption and disruption. The statistic is that on average, the average person is interrupted every 8 minutes. And I don't know if you're like me, but that must make me not average because I'm interrupted all the time. Text messages, surprise bills, people showing up at the door at my home. We call this the era of disruption. Now, I'm going to bring you back, tell you a bit of a story about how this hits home and how this hits true for me. So this is 15 years ago, different era. I was working for a company, very, very conservative, right? Every day you showed up in a coat and tie, formal meetings. If you were meeting with the CEO, you better be on your best behavior. And I remember this was a meeting with our CEO and CFO at this business, sitting around a large conference room table. And I feel my phone buzz. I ignore it. I feel it buzz again. I said, uh-oh. I look at it, and it's actually my wife who's calling me. Early on, we had a rule. If you call more than once in a row, that means there's an emergency. So early in my career, she did that. I picked up. I said, what's the emergency? She said, we're out of paper towels. And I came to realize that her definition of an emergency and my definition of an emergency were a little different. So now sitting in this conference room, I see that number come up again. I silence it again, and it happens over and over again. Eventually, I hear a different little buzz, and this time it's a text message. And I look down, and my wife sends me a picture of 5 positive pregnancy tests. She says, we're having a baby. Talk about disruption. That was the first time we had a child. I learned via text message notification. And in spite of my ineptitude on that day, everyone's healthy, happy, and so on. But fast forward a few years later, I'm sitting on a Zoom like this, and it happens again. I get the phone call, ignore. I get the phone call, ignore. I get a text message. But in the early days of Zoom, we weren't all that good at hiding our notifications on our computer. So the text message pops up on my screen, and it says, answer your phone, I'm pregnant again. Can't see that? Here it is. Won't tell you what the blacked out parts say, but you could probably guess. This is the era of disruption. And everyone's happy and healthy, but turns out it's such a difficult time that the Surgeon General of the United States, the same person who declared the COVID-19 pandemic, he declared that parenting is a national health emergency. The Surgeon General of the United States said parents are consistently more likely to report experiencing high levels of stress compared to other adults and declared that we needed to focus on supporting parents. Well, it's not just parents. If you look across the entire workforce, pre-AI, but even more in this era of AI, the entire workforce is dealing with something, not just parents. You've got caregivers who are spending a whole second job caring for a loved one. You've got people who are new to the workforce navigating life for the first time. You've got surprise bills. You've got denied insurance claims, bereavement, getting your kids ready to go to college, people working multiple jobs, people managing chronic conditions. We are truly living in an era of disruption. Everyone's got stress that they're juggling and that they're managing. What do companies do about that today? Well, over the past 10 or so years, there's really been an emergence of solutions that companies offer to try to help people with some of these issues, right? We have a medical navigation solution, companies that help you navigate the healthcare system. There's other benefits in companies out there that help caregivers. The reality is, though, it hasn't helped. People are still stressed. They're still juggling a lot. We are still living in the era of disruption. In fact, the way it's evolved has, many would argue, made it worse, where now companies are offering these narrow point solutions that people don't understand, that they're not engaging with. When they do try to engage, they're sitting on hold and getting bounced between solutions and not getting actually support and not getting the stress relief. Well, how is that stress relief happening? What does it cost a business? Well, scientists looked into it, and according to the research they did, it's costing businesses a crap ton. So if any of you have seen Back to the Future, you'll remember that scene. Car smashes into the truck and outpours a ton of manure. But joking aside, what do they say? So according to the Harvard Business School, stress is costing US businesses, not global, just US businesses, over $190 billion a year. That's just medical expense. When you layer in the cost to productivity, absenteeism, people going out on leave, people spending time at work, not doing work, but dealing with life, it goes from 190 billion to a whopping $300 billion that companies lose every year to managing stress. So what are people dealing with and how much time is it taking? We ran a survey about 4 years ago with 2,000 people. And it wasn't the type of survey where you just go and you answer a few questions. People actually tracked their time the same way that an attorney is billing every 12 minutes. They tracked their time throughout the workday for a period of 2 weeks, 2,000 people, cross industries, large and small businesses, tech workers, non-tech, people out in the field, people in front of computers, people on phones, but across the entire economy. And we had them measure how much time at work they were spending dealing with life. What does dealing with life mean? It could be that you got a surprise bill from Xfinity, and now you're going to call them, and they're not going to pick up right away. You're going to sit on hold for a while. You're going to get bounced from department to department. They're going to forget your name. They're going to forget why you called. They're going to drop the call, and then you're going to have to do it again. And hours suddenly disappeared from your day. And 9 out of 10 times, you still didn't get that bill resolved. It's when your 12-year-old son falls and breaks his wrist, and now you're rushing him to the emergency room, physical therapy sessions, and so on. It's when a flood that you could have never predicted, pipe breaks and you have a flood in your basement, and now you're dealing with getting the water out, mold remediation. It's the era of constant disruption. So across that group of 2,000 people who are measuring their time systematically, it was 17% of their workday was spent dealing with life. 17% of productivity loss. To put that into context, 17% is roughly the equivalent of 4 days of work every month, where you have a 20 working day month, 4 days of work, so almost 20%. It's 41 days of year, essentially, of extra PTO where you're paying people, but they're too stressed, they're dealing with too much to be present and focused on their work. So, what do those look like? Well, across most businesses, it's not one size fits all, but depending on what's going on in the life of your employees, they have a very different set of stressors that they're dealing with. We'll start with the average and then we'll drill into particular segments of the population. And then I'm excited to tell you a bit about what we do and how you can leverage AI and human support. And we'll talk about why AI alone is not enough, but leverage AI and human support to give people much more support, much more peace of mind. But across the average workforce, that 17% of time people are losing, well, about 20% of that time is them dealing with their life, right? It's their home, it's the faucet that's broken, it's the pipe that's broken, it's the car that won't start, it's the daily distractors. Another big portion is our incredibly complex, incredibly stressful, and incredibly expensive healthcare system of people trying to navigate that and trying to figure out, dealing with a claim that gets denied, or trying to get their father-in-law, who they're worried has dementia, to see a neurologist, but you can't get an appointment for 4 months, or to get your child into a therapist visit. It's all the other stuff. We have a category we call wild card because life doesn't fit neatly into these boxes, but it's those things that you would have never expected that come up. It's travel, it's family, it's finances. And then when we slice the data, we say, okay, if we can solve those problems, does that do it? Well, the reality is businesses are complex, they're diverse in different populations. So on average, the statistic is most businesses have 3 different generations working in the workforce today. And they have different set of needs at different points in time across both generations, across socioeconomic stratas, across life stages. There's a whole different set of needs. So when we start to slice the data and say, well, what do new parents need? New parents have a whole different set of stressors and demands than, say, young families or people later in their career or people who are working 2 jobs or single parents. So when you start to really look at it through that lens, you realize that to truly support employees in this age of disruption, it's a very complex proposition. You can't just throw a medical navigation solution at them or a caregiving solution. Say, okay, good. My employees are set. We're taking care of them because that's such a narrow slice of what people truly need. So what do young families spend most of their time, their distracted time on? Their home, that's a big portion. Things around the house. Dealing with the healthcare system, like we talked about. And of course, family. What about singles? Well, the single workers in your workforce, what we're seeing is the number one demand and stressor for them are spending time dealing with and understanding their benefits, navigating the healthcare system, and so on. It's different set for your new hires. They're new to the workforce. It's their first job. They maybe have never lived in their own apartment. They maybe never had to deal with their own insurance. They maybe have never had to file taxes for the first time, start to think about 401k savings, invested, had a credit card, and so on. Whole different set of needs. Your caregivers. Now, 18% of the workforce is a caregiver. And that's going to increase as the generation, as our demographics age and intergenerational support becomes more of a priority. But what are caregivers spending time on? Of course, they're spending time on caregiving, but when you're a caregiver too, you're effectively have less time for everything else. So what we find is they don't just need help with caregiving, but they need help at home. They need help with their finances because they're devoted they've got their job, they've got their second job as caregivers, and then they've got all of the weight of life's responsibilities. And single parents, again, a whole different set of demands. In fact, when you truly look at your workforce and you really peel the onion to see what do people need and what's distracting them, what are the stressors in the age of disruption, it's a very complex set of priority. Someone who's recently going through a divorce is going to have a whole different set of demands and stressors that are distracting them from work than someone who just had a kid, or someone who, for the first time, is returning to office after the pandemic after working from home for 5 years, versus someone who's managing a disability. So, what's the point? Well, the point is that we've been trying to solve a massive problem with the wrong set of solutions. We've been attacking this huge problem that, one, we know as human beings, we all feel the weight of life stress on us. But beyond that, if we want to look at the pure economic rationale behind it, economically, 17% of time is a huge amount of time people are losing at work. So, as a human and as a business leader, stress and life stressors truly matter. And we've been trying to tackle that problem in entirely the wrong way, with narrow benefits dissolved to sign one of these little rectangles when you've got a whole sea of rectangles where people need help. And that needs to change. So I'm excited to tell you a bit about what we do at Overalls and the complexity that we do. And I'll start by telling you a little bit of a story, because I think this story really highlights the challenges that people face with the status quo of how companies have traditionally thought about supporting people. So this is one of our users. Her name is Inez, lives in central New Jersey. The very first time Inez asked for help from Overalls, it was really fun. It was a joyous event. She wanted help planning her daughter's quinceañera, her 15th birthday, big celebration. And we helped with everything. We helped with the invites, finding the venue, finding a DJ, ordering catering, and so on. It was a very big, joyous event. A few months later, Inez asked for our help again. This time it's different. She says, I'm the only caregiver for my parents. My mother's physically disabled, wheelchair bound, and my father has dementia. Okay, caregiving. There's solutions out there to help with that. However, the problem she had was not a caregiving problem. The problem she had is that her parents, because of financial stress and because they wanted to age in their home, 15 years ago had taken out what's called a reverse mortgage. It's kind of like a mortgage, except instead of buying your house over time, you're selling your house over time. So over a 15-year span of time, every month the mortgage company would send them money, but little by little they're building equity in their home. And now the mortgage, the reverse mortgage, had come to maturity. So taking that out of financial terms, just talking about human terms, what that means basically is her parents were going to be homeless in a few months. They were going to lose their home that she had grown up in, that they'd spent decades in. And she needed to figure out what can she do, because this mortgage company now owned the house and the period of time that her parents could live there had come to an end. That was the help she's seeking. Now we'll talk about how we helped her. We helped her keep her parents in the home. We were able to help her also understand the contract, negotiate an extension, and then find a permanent solution for her parents. But what does that tell us about the struggles that our employees are dealing with? I think that story is powerful because it illustrates the main problem we see today, which beyond stress, it's that the solutions to help people are too narrow to the complexity of real life problems like Inez had. Her problem was a caregiving problem, was a financial wellness problem, it was a legal problem, it was a health problem, all wrapped into one. That's the true complexity of life. So with that context, I want to tell you there's a different way. And the topic here today is AI. And AI has brought incredible tools to bear, incredible efficiencies that allow us to support people more. We don't think AI is enough, so we'll talk about what we do. It's AI plus humans to support employees in the age of disruption. And I'm going to show you a little video to help illustrate that.
In real life, happens. Take the burst pipe that flooded your bathroom just as you're leaving for work, or the bad news that your elderly dad has fallen and needs more care. or even the pleasant surprise that you're expecting your first baby and now need to grapple with parental leave, childcare, and 529 plans. Ordinarily, each of these mean added stress, headaches, and distractions, and they cost you precious time, money, and focus. That's where Overalls comes in. Overalls is a first of its kind concierge service to help with life's hassles. Overalls will find a plumber and restoration crew and help you file an insurance claim. Overalls can research in-home nurses or an assisted living option for your dad. And Overalls can reduce the stress of expecting a baby by helping you decipher parental leave paperwork and finding a birthing center. When you offer Overalls to your employees, you'll be giving them each an extra pair of expert hands, which will boost productivity, company culture, and morale.
So what is this? This is what we do. The topic today is around AI in the era of disruption. Well, Overalls is a company that I helped found that's trying to solve this problem that people face, the stress, the disruption. And the way we do that is we use AI broadly to help. But in addition to that, a team of people, think of it as a personal assistant for everyone and everything, designed to help people across the entire spectrum of their life. Finding childcare, dealing with a broken pipe, planning a trip, everything that's thrown at people. Now, I'll illustrate this through a story. So Rebecca is a teacher in Florida. She works at one of the public schools in Pinellas County. They're a client of ours. And we got to know Rebecca initially because she was moving to a new home and wanted our help finding movers, finding people to pack, canceling her utilities, all the stuff that goes with that. When she found out she was having a baby, we helped her find babysitters. We helped her find a contractor to paint the nursery. And we helped her with other stuff along the way, like when her basement flooded. But where it got really interesting, and Rebecca already was accustomed to getting help. She knew that she could come to us for those life stressors. But where it got interesting was her son was born with a very rare congenital heart defect. And by the time he was 6 months old, he'd already had 2 open heart surgeries in Florida. And it was not looking good for her son. In fact, there's only a handful of doctors who knew how to treat the condition that her son had. And one of the 2 was all the way on the other side of the country at Stanford University, a surgeon in the children's hospital there. And Rebecca was able to get in touch, referred to him. He was scheduled to perform a specialized surgery that's very promising that could radically change the outlook for this child. And 2 weeks before the surgery was scheduled, Rebecca gets devastating news that her insurance company had denied the prior authorization. And beyond that, they'd taken one step further and removed Stanford from their network altogether. So this is the weight of the issue Rebecca was dealing with. Her son needed life-saving surgery on a teacher's salary and now forced to decide, do I try to pay for this out of pocket, which she can't afford, surgery canceled. And she turned to us for help. And this is where we were able to step in a different way than we had in the past. Not just helping find contractors around the house, but she was accustomed to coming to get help from Overalls. We were there when she needed her. And we were able to escalate this to our most senior health advocacy expert to help ultimately broker a relationship, again, between the health plan and Stanford and the surgeon and get a one-time exemption for that surgery. Rebecca's was so elated that we were able to resolve this. She went and told her company about it. They had no idea what she was going through. And being empathetic, the school offered to pay for all of her travel expenses there. But that's what employee support in the age of AI needs to look like. It needs to cover the daily distractors of helping people deal with the day stressors. It needs to help people with the disruptors, the things that don't happen every day, but when they do, they take up time, they cause stress. It's when your 12-year-old breaks his wrist. It's when you're moving. It's when you're dealing with an injury. It's those things that don't happen all the time, but do cause a lot of stress. And they need to be there for you when there's a disaster. When the Palisades fires happen in California, helping people find temporary housing, file insurance claims, deal with FEMA, replacing damaged goods, re-enrolling their kids into new schools, finding new doctors, everything that went with that massive disruptor and that disaster. People need that support from their company, and they need it now more so than ever in the era of AI. So that's what we do. We've built out an AI-enabled plus human personal assistant service that spans across the major areas of life and the major areas that companies offer support today: healthcare, caregiving, elder care, and so on. The way it works is simple technology followed by AI, but with every single problem someone submits, having a compassionate human who owns it end to end. So with that, I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions in the final 4 minutes of our conversation today.
Thank you, Jon. Appreciate that. A lot of good information there. I'm gonna see if anybody had any questions, but I do have one or two that I thought I was gonna ask. Let me just check in the audience to see if anybody has any. All right, all right, nobody, but at least I actually thought about it, and I know I'd put it in the chat too, that Americans are supposed to be one of the most highly overworked, overstressed work population in the world. But that said, if you were to look ahead in the next 3 to 5 years, right? So, what is that one trend or technological shift that organizations you think are currently ignoring, but will have to inevitably we're forced to change rather our approach to employee well-being or engagement, with AI coming into the picture? What is that one thing that organizations should be focused on if they were to do more of this?
So I think the biggest paradigm shift that's occurring right now, beyond how the workforce is evolving because of AI disruption, but in terms of how organizations need to think, is there used to be an old belief that's outdated. And that belief was that in order to be deep, you had to be specialized. And the reality is life is not narrow, life is broad and complex. And if your goal is to truly support people, you can't just help them in narrow slivers of their life. You need to be there for them. So to give you context, my mom broke her hip in December. Knock on wood, she's doing well now. But she didn't just need help navigating the medical system. She didn't just need help caregiving. She needed help figuring out the finances of it all. She needed help finding people to care for her home while she was in the hospital. Needed help finding people to care for her pets. That's true support. And that paradigm needs to change from narrow equals good to truly supporting and embracing the employee is what you need to strive for.
Okay, sounds good. And I think there was one more I was thinking of, just on something that you mentioned earlier, where companies try to provide a lot of different solutions to say, hey, employee wellness, employee well-being, here is a vendor you can reach out to for this, here is another vendor you can reach out to for something else, right? And to your point, when people call in, maybe they have to be on hold for a long period of time because, it's customer service. We gotta wait for our turn. But with that said, what what can companies do again? Having the diverse portfolio of services and solutions for employees versus a centralized platform, possibly, that employees can go to. I mean, what would you say might work best in the current situation or scenario?
What we're seeing is that companies are increasingly realizing the value of having a less is more strategy, that too many narrow solutions creates complexity, headaches, cost, overhead. But you can't just change overnight. You can't go from having all of these things to something entirely different.
Right.
So what we're seeing in a lot of companies is a gradual progression where they start to eliminate the point solutions that people just aren't using or don't understand, or they're not delivering what they promise, and offering something broad, and then over time consolidating. We think that strategy of gradual change is what makes the most sense in this environment.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Thank you. I know we're at time. but we appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for everything you've shared today. I'm sure the audience is going to make some notes, and some of us will reach out to connect with you on LinkedIn, get to know a little bit more about overalls or even otherwise. But thank you for being here today. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
All right.